Hey, community, welcome back. And if this is your first time here, I'm Dr. Blair, a doc in clinical psychology. And on this channel, we discuss psychology, inspiration, social justice, and all topics in between. First things first, hit that subscribe and bell button. I need to see you back next week. And of course, stay tuned because we're going to continue this conversation around our armor and defense mechanisms. Keep watching. All right, so before we jump into this, remember the battlefield is a recurring series here where myself or a community member will come on and discuss a battle that they are currently fighting and or have fought before. And this is the place that we release, reclaim, and reestablish our justice. Justice for our mind, body, soul, spirit, and even for our people. And without further ado, as I mentioned, we're going to continue this conversation around armor and defense mechanisms. And yes, drum roll, but yeah, I know you see it. It's right there in the title. We're going to talk about projection. Projection. And so, as I've been doing before, I want to start off with very clear definitions of what projection is, just to be sure that we're on the same page and we're looking at it in the same way, or at least similar. Projection. Unwanted feelings are displaced or put onto another person. It looks like someone having an angered reaction, but instead accusing someone else of being angry. It also is seeing your own, it's also like this, your own undesired or unacceptable feelings or traits, but instead seeing it as someone else's. So projection. And I know that we all know what a projector is, or the thing that we used to use way back when. But if you've been to the show post COVID, or you've been ever in your life, I don't even know what the younger generations are doing at this point. They probably just only stream at home. But anywho's, you know that in the back of the theater, there is this large projector that is projecting or showing the image that is coming from that device onto a screen in front of us. And just like that, the same thing happens here in our day-to-day life, where we may be projecting our own feelings, our own reactions, our own thoughts onto someone else as if they are that screen that we see in a movie theater. Now, with all of that being said, we start this conversation off with, first, what do? We talked about denial. Second, we moved into regression, or even, repression. My apologies. We talked about repression, suppression, sweeping it under the rug. Now we're talking about projection. Now, projection actually is kind of intertwined with denial. And I would actually say that when we look at all of these, they're all dangerous, but it's kind of progressively getting worse. Like we're moving up the scale in the in a ladder or range of danger as it relates to these defense mechanisms and armors if we use it improperly and don't catch it. And as I mentioned in the first episode, as it relates to this sub series, is that when we put on armor, or we're using the improper armor at a certain time when we're on a battlefield, it can actually not be helpful, and or it can even be harmful. For example, if you are in a situation where you need to be able to move quickly, having on heavy armor is not going to be helpful at all. Maybe you need to have on something that's a bit more lightweight, or use a shield instead. Now, I know I'm not in the military, so I don't have all of the lovely fancy terminology to be able to describe, but I think that you all are getting my point. I hope so. But with that being said, we want to be sure that we're using our armor in a way that is helpful, and actually in the way that is intended to be used. Now, personally and professionally speaking, I believe that projection is actually a bit more harmful than the others that we talked about this month. Why? It's because it involves other people. Now, what is harmful or hurtful or even just not helpful for yourself is now becoming someone else's problem. And at the end of the day, that's just not fair. It's not fair that we even all do it to one another, either whether we recognize it or not. It's happening. And it doesn't have to happen all the time. So we're going to get into some solutions around this. But I think it's quite dangerous when this occurs, because now it could actually start making that other person have feelings, or think that they're even having feelings that they're not. And it produces a whole lot of confusion. And as you all know, as believers, the word says that God is not a God of confusion. So we need to like nip that thing in the bud, you know? Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I think is actually helpful when it comes to projection, because it can be a bit tricky in actually recognizing when you're not being aware of your own emotions, is to do a quick empathy test. So let's do one right now. How might you feel if this were to occur to you? Joe comes along and Joe says, you know what? You have just been really irritated easily. You've been offensive towards folks, and it's just making me feel like I don't want to talk to you anymore. I need to keep my distance from you. You have been like a ticking bomb, and you're looking at Joe like, what is Joe talking about? Joe has been doing all of the things that Joe is mentioning that I'm doing at this moment. And then you even try to point it out to Joe, and Joe just denies it and says, oh no, are you serious? You were the one who did XYZ, ABC yesterday, today, and all of last week, and we are just sick of it. And so now you are sitting here doing a self check like, wait, hold on, like, did I do those things? Are those things happening? Is that how people are responding to me and just not telling me? And Joe is the only person coming to you? How might you feel if you found out that Joe is actually the one that's projecting? If you finally got to your bottom line of like, no, I'm not doing those things. That's Joe. How might you feel if Joe were projecting his own feelings onto you? It doesn't feel great. It can actually be a bit frustrating. It can feel unfair to have to question yourself, and it just downright is wrong. Of course, I mean, a host of other feelings may come up in this process, depending on how the situation turns out. But most of us, I'm going to go on a whim that most of us would not like that experience. And if that is you, then feel free to drop that down in the comments below if you would not like that experience. So that's an empathy test on how we might feel if someone were projecting their own feelings and thoughts and reactions, desires that they were not accepting onto us. We would not like it typically. And if that is the case for you, then you can only imagine if it's the other way around, if you are the person that's projecting their feelings, thoughts, emotions, undesired, and unaccepted onto someone else. And so when we do this empathy test, when we actually put ourselves in someone else's shoes and we imagine what that situation is like, then it's only fair to say, then I ought to be careful and watchful to not do those things to other people, right? I hope y'all saying right on the other end. I can't hear you right now, but I hope you're saying right. So here are some quick solutions. Maybe I shouldn't say quick. Here are some solutions because they might not be so quick. Is to actually reflect. You know what? Y'all know I love to give you some scripture. Reflect on what the word says. I actually talked about this in a short video, so feel free to go to my channel or see what that is. I think it's entitled "Focus on Yourself." But I'm going to give you some word in Matthew chapter 7 verses 3 through 5. It talks about, and I'm just going to summarize, but it says that if you have a log in your eye, why are you focused on somebody else having a speck in their eye? And then it fast forwards to focusing on yourself. Get that log out your eye, and then you'll be able to see more clearly in order to help your friend with that speck in their eye. In other words, it sounds very familiar because we hear that often when we get on the plane, don't we? Every time we get on the plane, they tell us about this protocol of putting on your own oxygen mask in order to help the person that's next to you if they need your help. And so there is a principle, there's value in actually doing our own self-evaluation and focusing on what it is that we need to be working on, what it is that we are feeling, what it is that we are thinking and or doing that's not helpful for ourselves and or even for other people. And if we are able to focus on ourselves, then we give ourselves the opportunity, we give ourselves the energy, the value in order to remove that log from our eyes simply from having a woosah moment and an honest moment of saying, you know what, I've got this problem, instead of pointing our fingers all day long at somebody else. So if you need a reiteration of what I said in that previous video before, honey, then you need to be focusing on yourself. I'm just saying, focus on yourself. Now, another solution to this is go and talk to somebody. We all need to have that external person, that person that we can trust to come in and tell us from an unbiased perspective of like, hey, these are some things that I have been recognizing that's going on with you. And to even just be able to talk to them and say, it's helpful to actually be able to externalize what you're experiencing internally, as it gives you an opportunity to kind of parse out and even hear what's going on in your life from a different perspective other than within. It's helpful. And so if you don't have a friend, a family member that you can do that with, of course, you already know I'm going to recommend that you seek professional help if needed. But we all need to have that somebody. And let me just add that that professional help is not your friend. Even if your friend is a licensed or trained therapist, they can't be your therapist. And I feel very strongly to say this, that that boundary between what is appropriate to handle in a friendship or even in any type of supportive type of relationship is not always the exact same thing that you will get from therapy. And sometimes, especially within neighbor communities where we are a bit apprehensive to participating in therapy, we feel like, oh, well, I have an emotional release from the people, my next door neighbor. I have an emotional relief from my spouse. I have an emotional relief with my, cousin. And those are good things. But don't mistake that therapy is only designed for emotional release. It is so much more. And also, it's just not fair to pawn all that responsibility on those trusted loved ones to hold such a big role in your life that they are not necessarily designed or even fit for. I hope y'all receive that. And if there are any therapists that come along who are feeling like, you know what, that happens a lot in my personal life, and I wonder how I can manage that, just feel free to drop it in the comments if we need to talk about that more. But we all need to practice some healthy boundaries, especially as it comes to that. Just saying. And the last solution I would say is, of course, as I mentioned all the time, this is a lot of awareness that this is requiring. We've been talking about awareness since when? Since I started this channel. So we need to be aware, and even in our self-awareness, it requires an incredible amount of honesty. And sometimes we don't want to be honest and even vulnerable with ourselves, even transparent with ourselves. And if you can get to a point where you say, you know what, I'm ready to take that step forward, I'm going to be honest, I'm going to be vulnerable, even in my own intimate time, then I encourage you to do so, because it gives you a chance to have a fair reflection of if there's a log in your eye, or how many logs are in your eye, even how big the log is, and what it might take to remove it. But without that honesty, then honey, you're just back at step one where we started in week one talking about denial. Now, how does all of this kind of come together as it relates to the battlefield? Because the battlefield is a place where we actually address spiritual concerns, soul related concerns, behavioral concerns, emotional, even thought pattern types of concerns. All of that mixed up in one, because they are all very much so intertwined and related. But as it relates to the battlefield, as I mentioned earlier, when we misuse armor, then it is not helpful. And in this case, as it relates to projection, it is harmful for yourself and toward others. Now, it actually also produces an increased likelihood that you would have a missed target. What does that mean? Think about it. If you are in combat and you are focused on one particular area, like that is what I need to take down. What if you are focused on the wrong area and you are just shooting and you're throwing darts, and you are, using all of your weaponry, you're using all those tools that we talked about a couple of months ago, and you're using it in the wrong place. You just exerted all of this energy, all of your resources for what? Focused on the wrong target, because you won't take the moment to be honest with yourself and recognize that there's a log in your eye and that you are instead projecting your feelings off onto others. With the projection, it gives this illusion that the image is in front of us instead of the device or the person that it's coming from. Again, another missed target. You are focusing in the wrong direction. Instead of focusing inward, you're focusing outwardly towards someone else. It is a missed target, and a missed target is a misuse and a waste of your resources, time, energy, so on and so forth. Now, I don't know about you, but I do not like wasting my time. And if I can avoid wasting my time, then I'll do so. Then why would you not do the same? I just don't understand why somebody would want to waste their time. Don't waste your time if you don't have to. It's just like running around the block several times with the intent to be able to catch something, and then you never catch it, realizing that the thing you were trying to catch is not the thing you were wanting to catch. I hope that makes sense. Why would you want to do that? I'd be so mad. I don't like running. So if the battlefield is already putting us in uncomfortable situations. We are in uncomfortable situations and places in order to address what needs to address it to get our reward, as we've talked about before. But in order to get to that reward, we've got to go through this rough patch, this discomfort. But if you're sitting in discomfort and you don't even ever get to where you need to be, that can be quite frustrating. And you could have been utilizing that time, that era, for something else. We don't want missed targets. We don't want to waste energy and resources focusing on the wrong area. We have to focus on our log and not the thing that's in front of us. Your device, internally and not externally, first. That's right, it's announcement time, and we are a little over 2 weeks away from the Battlefield Conference. And y'all, I know I'm sitting right now, but if I knew how to do cartwheels and backflips and all that jazz, I would, but I don't. So I'll spare myself from the accidents. But if you have not grabbed your all-inclusive ticket, please do so soon because I need to see you there. Y'all, the anticipation is building up. For those who have registered, I've even heard from some of you talking about how you're excited. I know that there are people even coming from out of town, and I am excited to be able to see many of you and even meet some of you for the first time. So if you haven't grabbed your ticket, you can still do so today. The information is right at the bottom of the screen, www.drblair.net/events/, and you will be able to get your all-inclusive ticket. And as I mentioned before, if you are not able to be there on November 5th here in Chicago, understandable. I know people have things going on, have already had plans. You have to catch it the next time we have it somewhere at a city maybe near you, but you have the opportunity to still be involved in this worthy cause of by donating and helping other people to attend who may not be able to afford to on their own. And it actually gives us an opportunity to continue to move forward even as we develop other programming for people in the body of Christ, especially helping them to pair mental health principles so that we are better equipped and that we're building on our mental stamina for the times that we've just gone through, because COVID was a whole lot. And even for things that are to come, we need to be in a place where we are prepared instead of being reactive. So we want to be proactive. And if you are someone who also values being proactive, then I assure you, coming to the battlefield is the place where you will be able to get not only healing, deliverance, knowledge, resources, community, but so, so, so much more. And I'm, of course, expecting to see you there. And if you don't already, go ahead and follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Clubhouse, and subscribe here on YouTube. My handle is the same at Dr. Blair across the board, and you'll be able to find out more information coming through the pipeline regarding the Battlefield Conference or any other upcoming events, because there are more upcoming events. But I'm not going to talk about it just yet. Not just yet. But again, I'm expecting to see you all there at the Battlefield Conference, on site, in person. Looking forward to it. Like, comment, subscribe, and share. Share with your community, and be sure that you're sharing with someone specific who might need to hear about projection. Now, don't be shady, y'all. If y'all feel like they projecting all the time, remember, we're focusing on our own log, but it is still helpful to share with someone else so that they can learn more about projection. And remember, before you go, and I'll see you next time, if I'm great and you're great, then we're a great community.